Marks. I'm pretty excited for this first one. We're starting off with a running back. It's James Conner. The questions there's so many questions with James Conner. He's going right now as the RB20 in ADP. We're looking at all of our ADPs here, guys, are from 4for4. So they add up CBS rankings, ESPN rankings, FFPC. So those are pro fantasy football leagues, high stakes leagues, NFL's rankings, Yahoo's rankings. So RB20, where are you willing to draft? Are you even willing to draft James Conner this year?
I'm willing to draft James Conner, but it's tough for me to grab him at the current ADP. I've only found myself taking him if it's as my RB3. Basically, I just don't want to have to count on James Conner for the full season, knowing that he's probably going to miss some time. So for me, it's not an indictment on James Conner as a player. It's simply just his health and whether he can stay on the field. I have him as my RB24 right now, and that accounts for injury risk, but I think there's probably not a realistic scenario where he's just going to be like a low-end RB2 every single week. I think when he's out there, he's going to be a high-end RB2 or an RB1, and some weeks he's going to be hurt, and you're just not going to get anything out of him. So it's tough with James Conner because we have to account for the injuries he's had to this point in his career. He's missed 9 games in the last 2 seasons, and after a great year 2 seasons ago, he was very, very disappointing last season. Although the one game he went off, he did actually give me an L on Monday Night Football in our home league, so that was a bummer. But Steph, I have a quick question for you with James Conner. I think we both agree that the talent and the potential workload is there when he plays. If he played all 16 games, if we knew for a fact he was not going to miss any time, where would we rank James Conner right now?
I mean, if I knew for a fact, it'd probably be like RB10, like low-end RB1, maybe even like, what was he that one year, RB8?
Yeah, I'd say a top 10 back, no doubt. He finished as RB16 last year in points per game, and he was battling injuries all season, so who knows how many games he played where he was banged up. And 2 years ago, he finished as the RB6, so we know the upside is there. Mike Tomlin wants to use one workhorse back. He always has, and it hasn't mattered who it's been. And something I found really interesting, Steph, here are the running back ranks in terms of snap percentage at the running back spot for the Steelers the past few years. So last year, actually not last year, we'll go 2 years ago because Conner was in and out last season. But in 2018, Conner was 6th amongst running backs in snap percentage. 2017, Le'Veon Bell was 1st. 2016, Le'Veon Bell was 3rd. 2015, D'Angelo Williams was in there, and he was 2nd amongst running backs in snap percentage. Then Le'Veon Bell in 2014 was 2nd in snap percentage. So when Tomlin gets a guy as his clear starter, he wants to keep them on the field and give them a ton of work. He wants to keep them in rhythm. He wants someone that can catch the ball well and run the ball well, and James Conner can do that. So, again, I don't mind Conner as my RB3. I think he has upside to be valuable when he's healthy. But if I'm going to rely on him as my RB2, I think there's a chance he's actually going to be out of the lineup too often for me to really feel comfortable with him in drafts when there's other great players on the board, like the Jonathan Taylors of the world.
Yeah, I was glad to see that Conner's ADP did fall a bit. He was going like early 3rd round at the start of the offseason. Now he's like the 405 is where his ADP kind of slots him in. It's just the health is such a concern. A quadriceps contusion, an AC joint sprain, a quadriceps strain, 2 ankle sprains, and a knee sprain. It's just there's a lot of red flags here. He's I don't want to say injury prone, but he's fragile. We all know like his success story as a cancer survivor. You kind of add that in with some COVID risk. It's tough to see him playing a full 16. Probably, I mean, if you had to guess, what would you say? I'd say in that like 10 game range. And that's, I mean, last year when he was battling the injury, he saw his snap share completely plummet. He was 80% of snaps in 2018, 54% last year, which is just it's awful. And that's factoring in the games that he played. We had Jalen Samuels taking away touches from him in the air, through the air. Benny Snell getting touches on the ground. And then the draft pick of Anthony McFarland. That's like the stamp of approval to me in terms of like the Steelers are telling us that there is concern here. Like they're concerned to the point where they're drafting Anthony McFarland. So look, if Conner's healthy, he's going to get the touchdowns, the passing work. He'll be there. I mean, he is a bell cow running back. He'll be a borderline RB1 if he's healthy and plays, but there's just too many question marks. You add in really a question mark that all the Steelers players come with, which is the Big Ben concerns. And really I'm surprised by this. The Steelers didn't do anything in the backup quarterback position. They didn't sign anybody. They didn't sign Cam when they had the chance. They didn't bring in Jameis. They didn't draft anybody. Like there's a lot of concerns for me there if Ben's not firing on all cylinders. And even if he is back and healthy, I don't think Pittsburgh is going to let him throw the ball 689 times like they did in 2018, which was the last time he played a full healthy season. So I think they're going to limit him, probably ease him in. I'm not going to say 600 attempts is out of the realm of possibility here, but this Pittsburgh defense has improved significantly since the last time Big Ben was healthy. So I think they're going to try to run out the clock here, let their incredible defense with the TJ Watt breakout, the acquisition and subsequent breakout of Minkah Fitzpatrick. I mean, that they're not going to need Big Ben to throw the ball 600 times, I don't think. So that's where James Conner is really appealing for running back usage. But I'm probably not going to have him in any of my teams because I'm going to go running back in the first 2 rounds more often than not.
Yeah, I agree, and that could lead to some pretty positive game scripts for James Conner if they're just crushing the clock out. But it leads to the question of if they're able to get a lead in games or they're playing that tough defense and it's not a 1-score game and they're trying to run the clock out, why run the tread on Conner's tires knowing that he's going to get banged up if they leave him out there? So I wouldn't be surprised if they're up in games, throw Benny Snell out there to run out the clock, which is a little bit concerning in a sense. And you said it, Anthony McFarland. I mean, 4th-round draft capital isn't insanely high for a running back, but it's high enough, and he's a gadget player to where if he's starting to take away even 25% of James Conner's work through the air, that's something that's going to cut into his value in fantasy football. So again, when Conner's out there with Big Ben, if this offense gets back to where they were before Roethlisberger's injury, James Conner is going to be valuable when he plays. And, at that ADP, though, I'm just not willing to take the risk. I think there's upside in players like Jonathan Taylor at that spot who gives you that boom, RB1 potential, but he doesn't involve the same risks as James Conner. So, again, I'm willing to take him if he falls dramatically in my draft, but I'm probably not going to end up with him because at the same rate, there's just a lot of wide receivers in that same range. And even if some of the running backs are on the board or off the board, I'll take DJ Chark. I'll take Tyler Lockett as my wide receiver 2 or my wide receiver 3 before I'm going to take the chance on James Conner. So that's where I'm at with him. And Steph, one last thing before we move on. Is James Conner kind of the A.J. Green of the running back position this year? We're talking a lot about A.J. Green as every time he's been out there healthy, he's been a stud wide receiver 1, and the sample size is much smaller with James Conner, but it's kind of a similar scenario. When they're healthy and when they're playing, they're going to give you value, but no one's really counting on him to play 16 games.
Man, I really don't think the upside for James Conner is quite as high. Well, I don't know.
He was RB6 in 2018.
That's like I'm thinking it through, and it's like, especially in PPR, I actually would equate those two in terms of their ceiling being in that mid-1 range, a top 12 option. If they play all season, when they're on the field, fully healthy, ready to go, they're going to be great. But you just have to hedge, and that's kind of baked into the ADP on both of these guys. Granted, I love A.J. Green's ADP as like the wide receiver 31 right now. Much better than I like James Conner.
He's not costing you nearly
the running
as much.
back 20. Exactly.